Hello, I'm Alex Lafkis. I wanted to talk today a little bit about people entering into sort of what we call the industry, people who are preparing to be guides. So it's a growing trend, which is doesn't matter one way or another, but I think that there's some things that people need to consider before they enter into, well, I guess this sort of adventure we call guiding. It's kind of there's some suggestions and different ways of going about it. I think a big thing that people need to consider before they decide they want to be a guide is, the first thing I would look at is how long, if once you made the decision, obviously, that like, okay, this is an avenue for me. One thing to really consider is how long is the season that you're going to be guiding. It's probably the most important decision. That's why I touch on it first, because if you're thinking to yourself that, oh, well, being a trout guide in Montana is just a dream job. Well, it's a great job, don't get me wrong, but you got to consider the length of the season as well. You got your runoff time. So how many trips can you do pre-runoff? Then you got your peak season, which kind of runs through all summer. You got to worry about warm water temps, obviously, July into August. And then you fall into September, October, and whenever winter hits, it's going to limit you as well. Same thing with, say, Northern Michigan is, you want to be a trout guide in Northern Michigan? Well, you got 4 months to make it, maybe 6 if you really stretch it. I'm not sure people give that as much consideration as they should. Just because you like fishing in the winter and you can catch fish in the winter doesn't mean that's actually a time where you can count on income and guide trips. Obviously, the more advanced you get, the longer you're in it, the more you can find those people to do it. So something that goes along with your season length is kind of, what are you going to guide for? Like I said earlier, Montana trout, that's one thing. Northern Michigan trout, that's another thing. You've also got to think about, when is it good enough to justify taking money to do this? When I look at it, I really see that trout season's a few month ordeal in Northern Michigan, 3 to 4, at most. There's some real lean times where the fishing just isn't great. If you're just going out and catching small fish or stocker trout or whatever it is, that's fine. It might not be something you can replicate for a ton of days in a year, but it might get you through a little bit. And that's where you should start considering multi-species stuff. Like, smallmouth is a great filler for people in Pennsylvania, Ohio, wherever they're doing a little bit of trout. They do a little bit of bass too, especially if you're fishing rivers that are somewhat marginal trout streams. Typically you have decent smallmouth bass populations in there as well. So that's a good thing, but it's something to consider. How do you fill your gaps? There's also things, like Michigan has salmon and steelhead runs. So if you're going to do that, then you're going to do, your, say, 90 days of salmon and steelhead, and then fill in some of your trout in your gaps, or bass or whatever it may be. I think that's one of the biggest things to consider before you look at this as like a real good way to survive and make money. Another thing to consider is, you going to do this on your own, or are you going to do this through a fly shop, or outfitter, depending on where you are? Some places have limitations based on outfitters permits, etc. Michigan's kind of just a free for all at this point. Get a license, buy a boat, and you're a guide. So the two things to consider with that is, if you can get in with a fly shop or an outfitter, that's usually a pretty good place to start. It'll get you at least somewhat established. It will get you experience. It will get you practiced out there, where you'll start learning stuff. You'll have a little network of guides you work with. Some will help, some will not, but that's sort of the deal. People used to be a lot less forthcoming with information than they are now. Now it's kind of a little more open, a little bit more, information's more readily available. Let's just say that. And kind of gone are the days of people cutting wench straps and, doing whatever they can, taking your net out of your boat, doing whatever they can to make your day as miserable as possible when you start. Or are you going to go and do your own thing? Now, if you do your own thing, obviously no one's taking any of the money you've earned for your day, but it's usually a slower build. You know, you're going to have less trips to start, probably maybe potentially a smaller network of people to work with. And a lot of it depends on self-promotion. So this is the social media, the marketing, you know, whatever it is, which obviously I've fought for a million years. And I still fight to this day. But it's what it is, and you know that's gonna help you get some, but you also have to understand the more self-promotion, the more promoting you do of fisheries, if you get onto a bite that's quiet and there's not many people around, the quicker that gets burned out. And it doesn't just get burned out for a year, it will get burned out every year from there on out once people learn it. It's just the deal. So those are, you know, that's kind of your two starting questions that you really want to think about before really diving in. Some other things to consider when you're guiding is like, how much are you going to make? You know, and you should also consider your age. But as far as how much you're going to make, if you start with an outfitter or a fly shop, typically you're going to start making a little bit more money quicker because they're getting the draw, the traffic that they've always had for years. But now also understand that you're selling a lot of what other people have sold for a lot of years. So you're going to have traffic. You're going to be around people. You're going to be meeting before trips. Whatever it is, that's what you're going to deal with. So that's going to help you get started, and you're going to make a little bit more money. You know, I always figure, you do 100 trips a year, you're working for somebody else, that's probably not enough to be your sole source of income. They're going to take between 15 and 20%, hopefully. If they're taking more than that, that gets really rough. So I feel like if you're working for somebody else, you're going to need to do at least 150 trips to justify it as a real income. Now, if you go on your own, you can shave that. But getting to those numbers is hard. So you just do the basic math. Say they're taking 20%. You got to do 150 for somebody else. That works out to about 120 on your own, which is tricky to get. You know, obviously, if you have some giant migratory run or something big that can fill 60 to 90 days, that's a good thing. And that's a starting point. And then you can just shuffle in and fill the odds and ends around it. Really, in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to make a ton of money when you start out. You're going to have unbelievable amount of unexpected expenses, whether it be trailer expenses, gear expenses, truck expenses, shuttles, more food, whatever it happens to be, things are going to hit you at the wrong time. That's just the nature of it, especially if you're on a seasonal sort of gig. Even if you are to do salmon and steelhead, by the time you hit December, you're getting your last days and you're waiting for your March stuff, you're going to be about out of money. And then you're going to spend your first 30 days working on getting that income, you know, getting back to, say, even. So I always figure, you know, and I wouldn't, you know, if you're grossing 30 to 40 your first few years, like that's livable. And then you're going to be able to kind of grow from there. You know, you see some guides who do make good money. A lot of that comes down to how long is their season. You know, you start heading towards the middle South and stuff where you can do 100 days or 200 days a year, pardon me, you know, because you have a 10-month season instead of 5 to 6 month season. Now you're starting to get into that 100 grand area. You always kind of figure, you know, 100 trips is roughly 50 grand gross, but that doesn't mean anything because there's so much reinvestment that has to go on. And that becomes a major determining factor on how well you do too, is like, how long can you make these seasons? Where are you in location? And going from there. Another thing to consider is also like your location from, or your distance for population centers. You know, if you're guiding in, Northern Michigan, you have access to more clients because you have a lot of people within a 3 to 5 hour time frame. But if you're in Montana, now you're depending on people traveling from wherever, all around the country to get there. Alaska, all around the country to get there. You know, so that's going to also limit sort of, oh, we got a nice break in the weather. It's time to go right now. Let's do this. I'm fortunate, being in Michigan, that I've got people within a few hours. I can call when I see good days and fill some days. That also helps them, and it reassures them that you're trying to put them in the best situation to catch fish, and it's not necessarily just, oh, need a paycheck. That's what will help you retain clients in the long run. The other thing, one of the things that you really got to consider too is your age. I'm in my mid 40s now. I know that I cannot fish as hard and do as much as I used to do in my 20s. In your 20s, you don't have the experience that I had, but you're also have so much energy to go and try new things. You can learn things and find new things out and go. So your 20s is really when you want to start. That gives you a bunch of experience getting going. And then as you enter your 30s, you're starting to really dial in that your experience is paying off. You're really starting to grind and really understand the fishing. And then as you start getting into your late 30s and early 40s, now you start slowing down. You're starting to get old. You got a bad shoulder, your back's sore. You can't do 12 days in a row. A lot of these things add up. So you gotta keep that in mind. Anybody who's starting later in life, they're never going to get to where younger guys are. It's just impossible. They don't have enough energy. They can't do it. I mean, I see retired guys claim they're going to start guiding at 55. Well, they're just going through the motions. And I can say that because I've seen it. If you're in your early to mid 20s, that's a really good time to start. And working through a fly shop or doing something, maybe your expenses are a little lower. You can start building that resume to where you're in your 30s. You can start kind of doing your own thing. And then you start maximizing. The other thing that happens when you're older is you need to maximize each day because it is harder to do more days. So you want to be getting the full rate, not getting hit for 20% each time. And that puts you into a little better position to where you can work less, but still make the same amount of income. That's kind of just an intro to this. There's going to be multiple pieces to this because I really think that, it's a growing, I can't even use the word industry, but it's a growing option that people are seizing on is to guide. There's some drawbacks with it as well, as we're fishing limited natural resources. So it's just something to consider. So there'll be a few more videos in this, but I just want to thank you for joining. I'm going to be doing a few more of these videos now. Kind of broke down and bought some new technology to where I can do it. So if there's anything you want me to hit on, comment in it, and I'll make sure to respond and put it in my mind as something to do. Like, subscribe, whatever you want to do, but we're going to try to stay on this a little more regularly. Thanks for joining.